As you know, it was March 13th, 1997.
Going north, and we see the Arch of the Lights coming over the McDowell Mountains, just real slow, but in a formation, and it was obviously, it was a little irregular. Don't really notice that type of thing unless it's kind of like, oh, well, the airplanes don't really come that direction typically, or at least in that type of grouping. So I just assumed military helicopter, just the most logical thing.
No, because there's no video left of it anymore. That's why. All the video of the actual craft has been confiscated. Like, it's gone. It's completely. I haven't seen a picture. I haven't seen an actual video of the actual craft I saw probably in a good 16 years, 15 years. So it's all gone. Like, I have not seen a good video of it in a long time.
So we go outside, and it's literally above us, because we're on Union Hills and Cave Creek. So it's like right here, right there. That's where the whole lineup was, just north of town, right? So we run from this trailer park, it was called Buffalo Ridge Trailer Park, but it was right just south of Union Hills. So you got to go west about, I don't know, maybe a block. And then there's this mountain preserve to the west of us. And so we went up to that area. There's a whole bunch of other cars out there parked. And there's all these people sitting in their cars doing the same thing we're doing, trying to get up closer to this, whatever we're seeing up there. And we're just staring at this stuff. Are you serious? We're all looking at each other going, is this really happening? Do you see all this? And this little preserve, there was all these people witnessing the same thing.
I think it was probably between 7 and 9 p.m. Not really sure the exact time. I just know it was completely dark outside. And something caught my eye. And so I looked up, and as it's coming over the mountain, I can see it. I can see the tip of it. It was a V shape, and I could see the tip coming over the mountain. So I stood outside of the truck, and I watched for a minute, and slowly it just went over. And there really wasn't any noise like a jet noise. It was more just like a rushing air. It was very quiet, but it was huge. And I was like, holy moly, what is that? And so my husband looked up, and he was like, oh my goodness, what is that? So we stood outside and watched for a few minutes, and it just kind of completely went over us, almost from like a northeast to a southwest type direction. It wasn't directly north-south. It kind of went at an angle.
Hello?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Clive Christopher. May I speak with Sheriff Joe, please?
Oh, yeah, you're talking to him, Clive.
I was given your contact information because you know of a credible witness that saw the Phoenix Lights. Tell me a little bit about it.
Oh, yeah. I've known Elizabeth for many years. She worked as a dispatcher, 911, and she's very reliable, very loyal, has a nice son that she works with. Elizabeth has written many, many books. And so she has a law enforcement background, journalism, and an honest person.
Do you happen, is it okay, would you be able to give me her contact information so I can give her a call and set up an interview with her?
Yeah.
911, what is the location of your emergency?
2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
As far as UFOs, well, I don't know. I can't answer that question. However, I'm an old guy. I'm not going to say nothing's impossible in the world today. So nothing's impossible. But Elizabeth, I think she saw some of these, and I wouldn't say it's wrong. It's not true. Who knows? There's evidence up there. What's the military doing? Is these all secret weapons they got flying around? Who knows what's going on up there in the air? The military, of course, they're very, very quiet on these issues. But at least Elizabeth has the fortitude and the courage to speak out. Now, maybe if she did this 30 years ago, they'll say she's nuts. But right now, you can't say that because the way what we're going in this world, you never know what's going on. We got the high tech. We got all this, like the dark skies here, the telescopes. You can see everything. So how do you know? And who knows what they're going to see with that big telescope? They might see some aliens flying around. Who knows? I don't take anything for granted. I just told you. I go back in history. I'm 92. I'm 91 years old. And I used to go to these 5-cent movies. Flash Gordon, and all. And I look at these movies. Aliens. I could go on and on. So don't disregard all these objects and people have an interest in. Because back in those days, it all came true. So I don't disregard anything now with space travel. We got space travel now, private. People are floating around in space. Costs a little money, but you never thought that would happen. But in 1992, I guess I was ahead of the game because I was dealing with Society Expeditions. That's what they were going to do, 1992. Well, hasn't that come true? So why would you disregard some aliens flying around? So I wouldn't disregard that, the thing that she came across on that.
Hello, my name is Clive Christopher, and I am one of thousands of witnesses who observed the Phoenix Lights in March of '97. This encounter had a profound effect on me and many other individuals, so much so that it led me to explore and investigate UFOs and related paranormal phenomena. The lights over Phoenix is a pivotal encounter in ufology unlike any other. I've discovered that there's more to this case than most people are aware of. This is an ongoing investigation. Before we get into this interview with Elizabeth Compton, one thing you have to understand is that the Phoenix Lights was not just one event, and it was something that the military, our government, could not prevent. March 13th, 1997 was no accident. They've been doing this for years, since the 40s, engaging, capturing UFOs, alien technology. You need to know my reasoning for doing this is to actually show and do my best to give that experience, because every anniversary of the Phoenix Lights, it's not told right. It's told as one event that lasted maybe 2.5 hours. And that's what they want the people who were not here on the outside looking in to think. What really happened, the reality of it, is the Phoenix Lights was more than one event, probably 12 to 13 different events. It lasted well into the morning hours of March 14th. There are some interesting facts that you may not know. This area was the military's best kept secret. From 1940 to 1946, Phoenix, Arizona was the testing ground they captured, and they knew what was to come in 1947. But one thing that they didn't expect was the invention of the portable air conditioner. An engineer invented the portable home window air conditioners, and this allowed for people to move west and live comfortably in Arizona, Phoenix, during the summertime. And at this time, that migration caused the city to grow and forced the military to pretty much take their operations to the Nevada desert. This is why we have Area 51. If you look at the records in the National Archives, if you look at the incidents in Project Blue Book, you'll quickly learn that Arizona has a very rich history of unidentified flying objects being spotted in the sky. There's even video of objects being taken out of the sky over Luke Air Force Base. You have the famous Travis Walton abduction. You have Incident 40, famously known as the Rhodes Disc. You have the Marana Air Base. You also have the Kingman sighting. The history of capturing alien technology in Arizona, it's nothing new. So when the Phoenix Lights happened, there was nothing they could do. Now, after, that's when you can begin to change the narrative and make it fit to what you want people to believe. But over 10,000 people witnessed something extraordinary. And the cover-up began the next day. Videos were confiscated. The men in black showed up at people's doors. None of the video photos from that first event exist. You don't see it on the news. You don't see it on the internet. It doesn't exist.
Minor entry accident, the 2700 block of 156th Avenue Northeast.
911, what is the location of your emergency?
And I was driving along, and it was cold out, and I had my window up, and I thought I saw something in the corner of my windshield that looked like not spotlights, but like light bulbs suspended in the middle of the air. And there was quite a few of them, maybe 10, maybe more, maybe more, but a few. I don't remember quite clearly. They were in a formation. They were in kind of like an arc, kind of a little arc. It wasn't necessarily a straight line. And I could kind of like coming up alongside them.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Compton. Started my law enforcement career in 1987 at the federal prison in Phoenix. And I graduated in 1989, and I started my police career at Youngtown Police Department on July 24, 1989. And I was a police dispatcher from 1989 until I finally got out in 2004. Well, I was the youngest of 10. My father and mother met during the war. It was one of these things. Oh, hi, how are you? Let's get married, okay. And then they had their own baby boom. My mom actually had 3 kids from a prior marriage, and then she and dad had 7 more. I was the last one. And the reason I wanted to go into law enforcement, I grew up in Maryvale, which anybody who knows the Phoenix area, there was a time when Maryvale, back when my parents first bought out there, you'd say something like, I live in Maryvale. People go, oh, you live there. Now it's, oh, there. It's an extremely high crime area. And I just saw a lot of stuff happening there, a whole lot of bad things. I've seen drive-by shootings. I've seen 2 people stabbed to death right in front of me when I was a kid. First time I was in 1st grade. Second time I saw it, I was in 7th grade. There was a lot of drugs, a lot of gangs. And I just wanted to do something about it. Initially, I wanted to be a police officer, and then my eyesight wasn't the greatest. And then I ended up as a 911 operator, and then I realized the eyesight thing was actually a blessing in disguise, because if I would have been a police officer, I would have had to have actually touched some of those people, and I didn't want to do that. I realized later it was like, no, let the officers touch the icky people. I'll just do the background, get the calls, and do the paperwork. Actually, I didn't know where I was really going to go, because I got the criminal justice degree. And the reason I got the bachelor's degree, as I said, my eyesight wasn't the greatest. And I remember talking to someone at Phoenix Police Personnel. They said, well, if you get a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, and if you get a brown belt in the martial arts, and if you learn to speak at least 1 foreign language, which I did. I learned to speak German, Spanish, and sign language. I got the bachelor's degree, and I achieved the brown belt in martial arts. And I remember going back to Phoenix Personnel, and I asked them, will you waive the eyesight requirement? And they said, not unless you get radiokeratotomy. And if you remember that's when they actually took the knife or whatever, and they would actually cut into the lens. And I said no. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And then I found out that Youngtown Police was hiring, and I thought, well, it's a civilian job. At least it's something. I didn't know what I was going to do with the degree. Then I walked into Youngtown, and the police chief said, you are hired. And then it either went uphill or downhill from there, depending on your perspective. Well, it wasn't much competition getting in. There was one other person that had applied for the position, and as it turned out, he had been one of those that he would go to work for a while, then quit, then try to go back, then quit, and then go back and then quit. Well, they had hired him back once already, and he quit again, and he was the only other one. I remember talking to the chief, and he was, he was impressed with the federal experience that I had in the prison, and then with the criminal justice degree, and then the Spanish and Sign Language. Didn't have much use for German, not in Youngtown, but they had use for the Spanish and Sign Language. And then I remember I just got the call one day from the supervisor, and then he said, "Listen, can you start on July 24?" I said, "Absolutely." And then he said, "Well, the pay isn't very much," and it wasn't. It was like 5 something an hour. And then I said, "Well, it's better than what I'm making right now, which is zero." And he said, "Yeah, sounds pretty good, doesn't it?" When I started, I found out that first day they had already given me a raise. I was going to start at 7 something an hour, so I was really happy about that. And I remember I got all dressed up because I didn't know how I was supposed to dress. They didn't require uniforms yet. And I remember I was so frustrated that first night because I was told to sit back and observe. And I can't learn just by watching someone else. I have to do it. And my whole first week was sit there and watch. And I remember they put me on radio on a Friday night swing shift. I was supposed to be on radio for 3 hours. I lasted 45 minutes. Like, didn't know where anything was. I hadn't been allowed to look anything up. I hadn't been allowed to do anything. And then all of a sudden I was there doing it all. Well, years later, I ended up becoming a trainer, and I did things a lot differently. I ended up training probably, I want to say close to 100 people. Well, actually, most of the time when we would get those types of calls, they were people that had mental issues. They were bona fide nuts. I remember we had one lady that used to insist the UFO would buzz the town and land on her roof, and she was a frequent caller. And then we had another lady. I remember one night we had like a burglary suspect or something, and we had called in the sheriff's office, Fox helicopter. Well, Fox came in, and of course they're shining the light down. She's calling 911 hysterically and saying that the Martians were attacking and they were shooting their death ray. I didn't have anyone available to go hold her hand or anything, and so I ended up telling her, "Look, if you have aluminum foil, put it up in your window, shiny side out." I said, "That way they'll shoot their death ray right back at them, and they'll destroy themselves." Well, I wasn't quite sure what I thought about UFOs. I've always did think, the universe is so vast that would be practically impossible that we would be the only planet with life. So I think I always did believe that there had to be life somewhere else. I just wasn't so sure that they'd get in a spaceship and come 90 billion miles or whatever, just to come see the lunatic asylum that, we know as Earth. I just wasn't quite sure about that. But I did get a few calls sometimes from people, they'd be reporting something strange up in the sky, and they're like, "Can't you see it? Can't you go out?" And I'm like, "I'm in a building with no windows, ma'am. I can't look out. What are you seeing?" And then very often I would end up transferring those calls over to the Air Force Base, because I'd tell them, "We don't have radar here. I need to get you to somebody with radar." So there were a few that I think were actually legitimate, and that those people were always very open, just actually very nervous sometimes. Like, I feel really crazy talking about this. I know there's nothing you can do about it, but it's up there and it's strange, and I don't know what to make of it. So, there was nothing I could do. We're street cops. We're not sky cops. So I would tell them, "Let me get you to the Air Force, and perhaps they can help you." And I would never transfer it to their emergency line. I always transferred it to their landline. Once in a while, I would think I saw something up in the sky, like a star that was moving weird, but I just thought it was my imagination. I didn't really pay that much attention to it, or I'd think, okay, I'm tired, or my eyes are playing tricks, or that's a satellite, that's a shooting star. So as far as an experience that I knew was something really weird, no. Okay, well, whatever it was, again, the lights, they were going very slowly. It was right over the White Tank Mountains. And between the White Tanks and Youngtown, Luke Air Force Base was just a little bit south of that. that's why I initially thought it had something to do with the base. And as to why I kept staring at it, I don't know. For some reason, I just couldn't look away. But again, I wasn't afraid of it. And it wasn't until it disappeared that shortly after that, that's when the dogs started barking again, in the neighborhoods. And that's when the mosquitoes, flies, or whatever, that's when I started hearing the bugs again. Until then, there was no crickets, there was nothing. It was just absolutely dead silence. I think that's why the phone startled me so much, because the phone was very loud.
One thing about the many witness reports is how many lights there actually were and their color. Quality of eyesight and positioning in the city play a major part in what people were witnessing. The first reports of the Phoenix lights come from Henderson, Nevada at 7:55 p.m. A set of lights in a V formation was observed traveling south. At 8:15 in Paulden, Arizona, a police officer reported seeing a formation of lights traveling across the sky, heading south towards the Phoenix area. Also, around this same time, the Lay family, who was on Good Morning America, sees the same formation of lights in North Phoenix. Around 8:17 p.m. in Prescott, Arizona, residents reported seeing a formation of 5 lights that blocked out the sky as it traveled through. Also around that time, a report comes from the Prescott Airport stating a small Cessna plane had a near collision with a massive unidentified flying object that was traveling from the north to the south. At 8:20 p.m. at Sky Harbor Airport, a city transit bus with passengers notices a formation of lights coming towards them. They exit the bus and watch the lights fly south over the airport and travel towards the Tucson area. At 8:30 p.m., a motorcyclist traveling on the I-10 from Tucson to Phoenix notices a string of lights over the open desert floor.
Okay, yeah, my name is Mark Lill, and I live in Tucson, Arizona, and I was driving from Tucson to Phoenix, and it was nighttime, it was dark, and I, just considering the way the land looked, I was somewhere between Picacho Peak and Eloy, where the ground is relatively flat. You can see out, onto the horizon, unobstructed for quite a ways. And I was driving along, and it was cold out, and I had my window up, and I thought I saw something in the corner of my windshield that looked like not spotlights, but like light bulbs suspended in the middle of the air. And there was quite a few of them, maybe 10, maybe more, maybe more, but a few. I don't remember quite clearly. And so I rolled my window down, and I was looking out over there, and I was looking at the top of a blimp, and I thought, I know it doesn't make any sense, but light bulbs aren't necessarily on the top of a blimp. But I didn't know what I was looking at, and I realized, no, I can see under it. That's not near the ground. That's way up there. And I thought, what is that? Because they were in a formation. They were in kind of like an arc, kind of a little arc. It wasn't necessarily a straight line. And I could kind of come up on them, like I was coming up alongside them, but they were way up in the sky. And I'm not really a conspiracy theorist. I'm not an alien believer. I'm not a UFO guy at all. So it didn't really occur to me that it was a UFO. It was more of a curiosity, like, what the heck is that anyway? And I kind of drove alongside it, and I could look at it. It didn't disappear. It hung right by me. And then maybe it was the way the freeway turned, or maybe it was something that this structure or this thing did, but it seemed to drift away to me, deeper into the west, while traveling north at the same time. But it didn't disappear. It didn't zip away. It didn't do anything like that. It was sort of a gradual
moved, but they all moved together. They didn't move separately.
At the same time, over 70 miles to the northwest, in Glendale, Arizona, a report comes in from the Kelly family. They reported seeing, while standing outside of their home, witnessed a V-shaped formation with multiple lights attached to a body traveling south towards the Estrella mountain range. How could the Kelly family and our motorcyclists see the same craft with 70 miles of distance in between them? At 8:32 p.m., a call placed from the Prescott Airport to Luke Air Force Base about a near collision with a Cessna plane and an unidentified flying object that just flew in their airspace. Shortly after this phone call, 2 F-14 jets were scrambled to observe and report. A police dispatcher in Youngtown, Arizona, notices a set of lights in a V formation over the White Take Mountains while taking a short break from work.
Youngtown was a very small agency, so I was running police radio for Youngtown and Surprise Police. We had both of them. I also had Surprise Fire. And I was answering all 911 lines. I would answer the phone lines, any walk-in traffic that came in, I had to deal with that. If the officers came in with the prisoners, I had to help deal with that. So it could get pretty busy. And I do remember on that night, for some reason, it had been crazy busy. And I had all of my officers ended up with prisoners. So they were all busy up at the District 3 jail. Everybody, literally everyone had a prisoner. So they took them up there for booking. And I remember thinking, thank God, and I finished up what little paperwork there was to do. And I was exhausted because it had just been one phone call after another, one crazy thing after another, and then one call, just boom, boom, boom. So I finally had a chance to catch my breath. So I remember I went to the back door of the police station and I opened the door because I had a nice view of the White Tank Mountains. It was real, real pretty, and I just wanted to catch my breath. And that's when I saw the series of lights. It looked at first like it might be aircraft or something that was flying in formation. And that was right over Luke Air Force Base. So my very first thought was fighter jets. Then I'm like, no, they're going too slow. There's no way those are fighter jets because, fighter jets are moving fast. This was moving very slow like this. And then I thought, okay, maybe they're helicopters, but that didn't seem right either. Because, helicopters, they never fly smooth. They're going to have that little bounce as they fly. They just do. This didn't have that either. I remember I just couldn't stop looking at it. Just something about it was mesmerizing. And I didn't realize until later, when I was outside the door, there was absolutely no sounds anywhere. There were no dogs barking. There was no sound of insects, nothing. It was just absolute dead silence. And I remember wondering what it could be. I wasn't afraid of it. For some reason, I just couldn't stop looking at it. And then finally, the phone rang in the station, and that kind of snapped me out of it, so I went in to answer it. It was one of my officers. He just wanted his report number and his times for his call, so I gave it to him. It was maybe a 45-second call, and then I went right back to the back door, and by that time it was gone. In the meantime, the whole time I'd been standing there, it was just moving very slowly. And then I don't know if it picked up speed or what, I don't know. It was just gone. Well, normally when an officer would have called me from the jail, I would have, given him his times, his report number. I would have said, what all are you charging this guy with? What happened out there? I'd have given him the information on warrants, tell him I have his paperwork, stuff like that. Normally it'd take 2 or 3 minutes or up to 5 minutes. Just depending on, what the situation was. In this case, it was like, hello, this is Officer Smith. I'm calling for my times. I was like, okay, your start time is this. You were on scene at this time. Your arrest time was this. Here's your report number. You need anything else? Okay, goodbye. It was very fast. I cut him off, basically. I wanted to get back to the door. It was almost like I was being called, maybe. I don't know. that I just had to get back to the door. I wanted to look out there. But when I got out there, they were gone. It was right over the white tanks. I was looking towards the west, and it had been my habit to look out the door when things were quiet, because there was a church right in behind. They had a beautiful little cross that they always had lit up. I just always had found that relaxing, and then the stars over the white tanks, they were always just so pretty, and that's what I was looking for. And that's when I saw the lights, and for some reason my eyes just locked on the lights, and I just couldn't stop looking at them. And I was very peaceful, just a very, very peaceful feeling. Actually, I had never closed the door. So I just came back in, answered the phone, then went right back to the doorway, and it was gone. There was just nothing up there. It was still quiet, but there was nothing up there. Then that's when I heard the bugs and things starting to come back. And that's when I realized that those sounds had been missing. And that's when I started to get a little scared. So then at that point, I came, because I remember looking up all around the sky, like, where did they go? And then I don't know, I just started feeling scared at that point. And that's when I closed the door and I made sure and locked it. And I actually, a little embarrassed to admit this now, but I actually pulled a chair up and kind of, set it up under the doorknob. No one had a key to that back door, so if anyone wanted to come to the back door, I had to be the one to let them in anyway. Well, what was strange about that, the phones weren't ringing at all. Nobody was calling in. Looking back on it, I'm figuring people are probably still outside looking up at it. Nobody's calling. And it was only like about, I'm going to say maybe an hour left before the end of my shift. But I do remember, because it was like a 30-minute drive, and there was a lot of lonely, isolated space between there and my home. And I just remember feeling very uneasy because I had to drive through those isolated areas to get home. So I remember when I got home, that was another thing I did. I did the same thing at home. I locked the doors and then I blocked the doors. I don't know why I did that. I just felt so incredibly nervous and uneasy about it.
Through interviews with other people, they do remember seeing 2 F-14s scrambled, but I do not. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. By the time that the lights left our site, we got back on the bus and traveled into downtown. So it's very possible that 2 F-14s were scrambled. This next report backs up those claims. The 2 pilots that were scrambled returned, and they are visibly shaken up. During their flight, the pilots noticed something out of the ordinary. Based off of the report that was given, they followed a V-shaped object that was in a straight line headed south. Both pilots said they witnessed a set of lights in a V-shaped triangular formation that was up to a mile wide. Shortly after their return, Luke Air Force Base goes on a full facility lockdown. From 9:45 to 10:30, over the Barry Goldwater Range, a string of lights is witnessed and observed by many people. The videos that are shown on the news during the anniversary show this event. In the early hours of the following morning, reports of strange lights continue to come in. One of those reports comes from a police sergeant who was patrolling Southeast Phoenix and saw lights traveling from the northwest in a formation to the south, heading directly towards him.
He had called me, and as he knows, I don't talk about it. I've had people over the years asking about it. I really don't say anything much about it. But as far as public statements, I don't make. And the reason I don't make them is because I see myself as not only as a I don't want to say certified, I can't think of another word, observer, but a verifiable observer. And then at the same time, what I was doing could be verified.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
you know what I'm saying?
You were a cop.
So in reality, that is a dangerous place to be if you have people who don't want something to be known. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So I've kept it to myself, not to discuss with anybody or any group of people. And I've had people come to me all the time, and I just You know, one thing I ask people all the time, what happened to the light? If they can't tell me, then the conversation over. I know you didn't see nothing. But it was an interesting time. It was a really interesting time. You know, I was a police sergeant at the time when all this occurred. I'm just starting my shift. My shift started by 8:30. 8:30 or 9 is when my shift started. I was working third shift at the time. At that time, I'm based out of Ahwatukee. There's a little substation there, 48th Street and Ray Road. And so I'm basically monitoring Ahwatukee and the south side of Phoenix because there's no other sergeant or lieutenant around. At the time, they were busy on something else. So I had all Ahwatukee foothills and South Mountain side from Central to Tempe up to Van Buren. So I was a sergeant that whole area at the time because, like I said, those sergeants were busy and lieutenants. So I'm just out on patrol at the time. But I see everything from the other side of the mountain. Well, what I see are the lights coming from the west, like far west. Lights shaped in like a uneven boomerang, you know, shaped like a boomerang, a triangle, moving a triangle, but like a boomerang with more lights on the left and more on the right. So it's coming westbound, I'm coming eastbound from the west, so I can't really tell what's over because, like I said, I'm in Ahwatukee, driving towards the north side, and I see it coming. I'm trying to figure out what it is. And then I stop and just kind of watch it slowly move across the city. So I can't tell if it's going over Central Phoenix or it's going over South Phoenix. It's just big. Okay. The lights of what I saw are probably what the pilot saw. Okay, it had been that time of night for what was going on. It wasn't early, wasn't a lot of people around. So it had to be late. That's why I keep hearing 8:30. I'm like, no, it couldn't have been 8:30. I wasn't even at work then. The light that I saw had to happen, really, I think it had to happen between 11 and 2 o'clock in the morning. And the reason I say that, because nobody was around. You know, the police radio was quiet. I was listening for, I was waiting to hear dispatchers say people are seeing things, but nothing ever happened. Not a word came on the radio at the time. You know, and I was so stunned by what happened, what I saw, that I went down to the precinct on Southern and 7th Street. I just went in and just stood there, walked around, see if anybody gonna say anything. Nobody said anything. Nothing came on the radio. No, nothing at all. And the first time I heard anybody mention anything about it was the next day. People were calling in the next morning about what they saw.
Were they near the mountain ranges anywhere?
You know, I'm gonna say they were closer to the South Mountain Range than they were up north. Because I thought they were flying over South Phoenix, the way I'm looking at them, but it's so big. So they could have went from South Mountain, the flight could have spread from South Mountain to the Cardinal Stadium. I just couldn't tell. They were very wide, but they were close to the mountainside.
March 14th, in between 4 and 5 a.m., an entry-level journalist places a call to Luke Air Force Base and gets information from base personnel about some of the events that took place the previous night. The journalist and the 2 pilots have been completely erased from record.
And I remember when I went in the next day, you know, I mean, the Phoenix lights by then, that was all over the news. That was all anyone was talking about. You know, some of the officers, they were like making fun of it, just like, oh, haha, you know, the Martians were coming and whatever, you know, and all these people, you know, none of them had seen it. They had been booking inside the jail where there's no windows, nothing to look out. So none of them had seen it. And then they were just laughing and cracking jokes and stuff. So I remember I told them, well, when you guys were all booking, I looked outside. I thought I saw something. And that's all I said. And then they kind of startled them. Oh, did you see Martians? I said, nah, it must have been fighter jets. And then I just turned my back. I didn't say anything else. I did not want to subject myself to ridicule and believe me, cops can be brutal. They can be very brutal, and I just didn't want to be an easy target. I think mostly I was in denial because when I had heard about the Phoenix Lights, I had heard about something going north, something going north up the 51. It wasn't until like a couple years later I heard about others that had seen something going south. I just kind of tried to block it out. And I remember I kept telling myself, couldn't possibly have been that because the one that everybody saw was going north and what I saw was going south. I didn't want to think that there could be a second one or that maybe something was just circling. I didn't even want to think about it. So I tried to put it out of my mind, but I never really could. And I just remember, well, pretty much after that, I was always pretty nervous about driving alone at night, which I had to do quite a bit because, the nature of the job, the hours. I stopped doing a lot of ride-alongs with the officers too. I just didn't want to be out there. Well, especially with stuff coming out now that the government knows a lot more than what they've let the people know. Yeah, I am a believer. There's something going on. And I'm not going to discount it. I'm not going to say that there's no UFOs, there's no aliens. I'm not going to say there's no, what do they call it, the undersea objects, that come up from, I'm not discounting anything anymore. And as far as, you could tell when someone was totally nuts, and then you could tell when some people were just very disturbed by what they were looking at. And I guess there was always that little nagging thought in the back of my head, like, if I talk about it, something's going to happen, either something to do with UFOs or the government. I remember hearing all those stories about men in black, going to see people if they reported a UFO or this or that. Yeah, I just didn't want to bring anything down on myself. Now I'm at the age that I just don't care anymore. And it's time to just go ahead and talk about it, and then other people are coming forward too with stuff that they've seen, they've known. It's like, at least thank God I'm not the only one, and I saw what I saw and, make of it what you will. But I'm not, this is something that I saw, I experienced, and I'm not going to hide from it anymore. And I'm not going to hide it, and you can accept it or you can not accept it, whether you do or don't, that's not my problem. My thing is, I saw it. I would say document it, document. Come forward, get your testimony out there, so that way nobody can deny it later. Because, even now there's people that deny the Holocaust ever happened, despite all of the documentation. And that's what I would tell police officers now. Like, you know what? You don't have anything to be ashamed of. There's nothing you need to hide from, and it's, if it happened to you, you need to get it out there. And you need to share that, and you need to let others like yourself who may have had those experiences, let them know they're not alone. Because that's something else that kind of freaked me out, was I thought I was the only one. Maybe at least I knew I was the only one at my department that saw it, and I wanted to keep my mouth shut just simply because I didn't want to face the ridicule. But now it's like, you know what, anybody that's going to ridicule you, that's their problem. You need to come out and you need to be honest, and you need to tell what you know. Even if you don't think you know anything, you need to tell what happened. Well, for one thing, do your research. There are a lot of fake reports. I mean, anybody can come up and say, oh, I saw this or I saw that. It happens. It happens with any conceivable subject whatsoever. But, don't be afraid of it. Do your research. What is it they say? Trust but verify. Go with the more reputable ones. And again, if you see something, don't be afraid to talk. Hopefully whatever you may have seen, hopefully it's something that can be explained away. That would be something that I would actually prefer to come out, oh, this was something new that the military was testing. I would so much rather know it was something like that rather than think possibly it was something hostile.
I have interviewed 273 people. None of them have reported seeing the Phoenix Lights moving at very high speeds. The one thing about the Phoenix Lights, the craft was moving slowly, gliding across the sky. When you look at the timestamps that are attached to the witness reports, it's very possible that there was more than one craft. The distance from Glendale to Sky Harbor Airport is exactly 15 miles. Even with 2015 eyesight, you wouldn't see the lights attached to a body from that distance. So what the Kelly family saw at 8:30 could possibly have been another craft that was happening at the same time. The one common thing that we all seem to share is the fact that we have had multiple experiences after the event.
I've had several things that have occurred since then. I don't tell people, look, no, they don't get it. They won't get it. You know, and the only reason these things have happened to me is because since that day, I opened my mind up to seeing things greater than what my eyes and ears were showing me. Looking beyond, looking at the forest instead of the trees. And doing so, I see things that other folks don't see because they look at the trees. Because I know this world is made up of things greater than what our government or those in charge it's more things out there they want us to know about. And really, the public really couldn't take a whole lot. So, for myself, I don't need verification because I saw what I saw, and you can't tell me what I didn't see. And like I said before, because of my what I was doing at the time, that just makes me, what I say, more verifiable. You can just check out records and see what I was at and what I was doing.
Something special took place that Thursday night in March of '97. And in reality, it happened all year long. And it wasn't just in the month of March. From January of '97 to January of '98, the reports of UFOs in Arizona spiked. Also, a new type of sighting was introduced to the state of Arizona.
Yeah, there's one that I usually really don't like to talk about, but it was like 10 months later in January of '98. And I remember for Christmas, my niece had loaned me a video camera so I could film my little boy's encounter with Santa Claus. And it was mid-January, and I had taken my son, he was 4 years old. I strapped him in the car seat next to me in the front seat. And it was, I want to say around 9 o'clock, maybe as late as 10 o'clock, but we were driving on Camelback Road westbound. I was going to go the loop 303 and then take 303 north to Waddell where she lived. And as we were coming behind Luke Air Force Base, four fighter jets took off like right in front of my car because I was apparently at the end of the runway. And then another one took off as my car continued like right over my roof, and another one took off like right behind me. You know, and again, first thing I thought was, night maneuvers. And then I remembered wondering, is it safe to take off so close behind each other like that? And then I was thinking, those guys look like they're going out to really fight something. And then I remember I looked up to the left, and that's when I saw this huge, big black triangle. It was like an upside down triangle, and there were bright red lights on the 3 points. And again, I wasn't scared. I was mesmerized. I couldn't stop looking at it. Yeah, I was driving full speed ahead, and I just couldn't stop looking at it. And as far as the amount of the sky it took up, if you take a basketball and put it in your hand and hold it out arm's length, that's how much of the sky it took up. It was unbelievably big. And as I was looking at it, and this is going to sound crazy, but I felt like something was looking back at me. And then there started to be some really weird, strange, thoughts coming in I know my own thought patterns. I know my own crazy brain and how I think and what I think. And I know what I don't think like. And these thought patterns were just coming in almost like, I don't know, sing-song or a lullaby, maybe. And it was, but what really, I wasn't upset until I realized my 4-year-old was parroting what I was hearing in my head. He was saying what was going in my head. Like I'd hear it and then he'd say it. Anyway, I remember I screamed out the window. Excuse my French. I said, "Get the fuck out of my head and leave my child the fuck alone." And it was like right around then, it just suddenly disappeared like flicking off a light switch. And then I saw the fighter jets. They had gone real high. You could barely see the jets. You know, all you could see was like their lights, little tiny lights. And they were flying all over the skies like they were looking for it or something. And then the next thing I remember thinking was, I don't know if those guys are incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, but I'm just glad they're up there. And at that time, that area wasn't built up. Again, that was raw desert. And then the planes landed. And I realized I was out there all alone. And I had a child with me, so I looked over to check on my child. And what really freaked me out was his car seat was in the back seat. And I don't know how it got there. And he was laying on the seat next to me. He was in the fetal position. And I remember I reached over to shake him. You know, I thought, he's asleep. He's got to be asleep. And you know how if a kid is sleeping, you know, you shake them, you know, they'll like stir or something like, he didn't do that. I raised his hand and dropped it. It was like he was dead. And I remember I got so damn scared, and I checked his pulse, I checked his respiration, and I'm still going full speed ahead towards the Loop 303. And he's breathing. He's got a good, strong pulse. I just can't wake him up. Since I was almost at my niece's anyway, I went ahead and went up there, and she asked, "Where's your son?" I said, "He's asleep." And then she was pregnant, and I let her get back inside her house, and then I'm out there alone again. I remember thinking, okay, am I going to go back through the desert and be out there alone, or am I going to go down Grand Avenue and go through the hood? I chose the hood. And I remember I broke all speed records getting home, and I couldn't wake my son. And I remember I carried him inside the house, and I put him on my bed. And he didn't move all night. I sat by him all night. Again, I kept checking his pulse, his respiration. It was normal. It was fine. I just couldn't wake him up. I remember wondering, what am I going to do? I mean, what was I supposed to do? Take him to the hospital? Well, you see, Doc, there was this big UFO in the sky, and the Air Force chased it, and now I can't wake him up. Oh, that would have gone over great, wouldn't it? I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there with him. And then the next morning, his eyes just popped open as normal. And then he sat up and he said, "Mama, is it time to take the camera back to Tata?" And I said, "We took it back to Tata last night." I said, "Don't you remember? We got in the car." I said, "Don't you remember? We went by the Air Force. You remember the planes? Do you remember the planes taking off? They took off right in front of us." I didn't say anything at all about the craft or anything. I said nothing about that. And my child had the most blank look on his face. He's never had a blank look on his face like that before or since. And I kept asking him, "Don't you remember? Do you remember the planes? You don't remember getting in the car? You don't remember going?" And then he just looked at me, and then finally he turned away and said he was hungry. And to this day, he has no memory of that night. I remember I was going to look in the newspaper the next day, and sure enough, there was an article in there, something about it, and they're saying people were calling in about it. And this is when I knew I did the right thing and not taking him to a hospital or anything, because the Air Force had said, "Oh, we got no calls. No, we didn't scramble. Nothing happened. We've heard nothing. There's, back to your lives, citizens. There's nothing to see here." They absolutely denied anything had happened. And I knew that was a bald-faced lie because I saw those fighter jets take off. I had wondered, should I call the base? Should I not call the base? And I decided not to, because I was just too scared, and I didn't know what they might do, especially if I told them, what happened with my son and the car seat. I didn't know what to expect or anything. I just was scared. And I pretty much kept quiet about that from, there's been a few trusted people I've told about, but for the most part, I just didn't talk about it. I never even told my mom. Honestly, I have no idea, unless it was, I don't know, some kind of a, what do you call it, a reconnaissance thing? But what were they looking for? That's the thing I can't understand, is like, what were they looking for? I'm not going to say there's any evil aliens. I'm not going to say there's any benevolent aliens. If there were any, I think they're probably, just like us in some ways. They're curious or doing exploration, whatever. But as to why they chose Phoenix, why that night, why any of it happened, I have no idea. And that's the part that scares me, is because it is unknown. And to this day, nobody really knows anything about it. I mean, a lot of people saw it, but no one knows why, and no one can explain it. And I think that's what's so terrifying for most people, me included. Even when I'm in the pool, even now, I look up and I see those things. I start seeing them, and I leave the pool. I mean, I like to swim at night because there's less risk of sunburn. But when I see those things start, those stars and stuff start moving weird in the sky, my son, he thinks they're cool. And I'm like, well, you don't remember that big one. And that's another thing with my son, too. He says, Mom, I think they might have been programming me in some way. Because I know when, I homeschooled my son for the most part, but he wanted to try public school. I said, you'll be sorry. And they actually tested his IQ. His IQ is through the roof. So I don't know. Did that have anything to do with it? I don't know. I have no idea. But he said, Mom, I don't think they were there to hurt us. And he told me one time, he said, if they would have wanted to hurt us, they would have hurt us. And he said, when you yelled at them, they stopped. So he said, at least they had enough respect to stop when you told them to stop. Because he said, seriously, what could you have done?
I have interviewed police dispatchers, officers, law enforcement, military personnel, government officials, ex-military, firefighters, citizens, and while many of the reports differ from the color of the lights, how many lights there actually were, the physical shape of them, when you look at the locations of the witness reports, along with the timestamps, it's extremely possible that there was more than one craft. There were over 10,000 people that witnessed the Phoenix Lights that night. Some of them have moved away. Some still reside in the city of Phoenix.
Did she talk to Governor Simonton? I gave her Simonton's number. Did she ever reach him?
To all my fellow seekers of the unexplained, we've discovered aspects of this complex and bizarre UAP incident that are not a part of the mainstream narrative. The question is why? Why are these other aspects of this incident that affected so many witnesses, perhaps the most eyewitnesses in UFO history, excluded from the record? I think the mystery of the phenomenon goes beyond the UFO realms of the paranormal and unexplained. The investigation continues. Good afternoon. This is Clive.
I'm looking for Clive Christopher.
This is him, Master speaking.
This is Tom King. A mutual friend of ours, Steve Barone, gave me your phone number, and he mentioned that you were doing a deep investigation into the Phoenix Lights and suggested that we talk. I was there that night. I recorded one of those videos. Well, I was one of the original people who shot one of the videos that night from the 10 o'clock event. And I was one of the 5 investigators that spent years investigating this afterwards. And there's so much information. There were hundreds of people that we talked to. But one of the things that nobody dug into that they should, there's a lot of things I know about this that people have forgotten or they never heard about. There was a whistleblower from Luke Air Force Base that called the National UFO Reporting Center the night this happened and spilled out everything, and that's all recorded. Did you know about that piece?
No, I didn't. Does this in fact involve the two pilots that flew out and observed?
Yeah, this guy, his job was to take care of the aircraft after it landed, and one of the things that was mentioned is they have gun camera footage, FLIR footage of the boomerang when they intercepted it, and he had to take that tape out. They filmed it with a Lantern 2 FLIR pod, and the object went dark. It jammed their radar, and the pilots got scared, and they returned to base and said it wasn't one of ours. The tape was sent to Washington, D.C. It was covered up and never seen by anybody. Not many people even know this event existed